Hello, everybody. So, the third Sunday of Advent is now in the books. And you may remember a little bit of what I said last week and how Christmas can sometimes be a time of great discomfort for quite a lot of people. Actually, to be honest, in my time, I think I've met more people who absolutely despise Christmas more than I ever care to imagine. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this. People become very, very aware that there's a lot of profiteering and a lot of grifting to be made during Christmas. And then there's also a lot of and it also immediately after, I heard that bus prices are going to go up again to £3 cap, when just 12 months ago they said they were going to only raise it to £2.50. It seems to go up every so often, and the service seems to get worse and worse and worse. Anyone familiar with your experiences with, say, Go Northeast or Stagecoach will testify to this matter, or to this effect, I should say. I remember 11 years ago, you could get from the bus stop in my home village all the way into Newcastle city centre and back for just £3.60. Nowadays, with this cap, you're not going to be able to do that travel for anything less than £6. £6 just in travelling. There used to be a time where, on good summer's days, I would walk the 11 miles to my work. I would get a bus back because there's no way I'm going to spend another 2 3/4 hours of walking. Maybe really good, and may shift a couple of pounds here and there. I remember one time I did it during the summer, and I had like a vest on, like a sports vest on, and I walked. By about the final hour of my shift at work, my arms, my neck, everything, it was excreting heat, and everybody was making mention of it. It was like, is something burning? It smells like something's burning. Anyway, back to talking about Christmas. Somebody came back to mass this morning, because what I did is that instead of going on the Saturday night, I went on the Sunday morning because I had a shift at some place last night for about 6 hours. So I went this morning, and it was a priest who, for the purposes of this video, I won't disclose his name, but just to let people aware, this is a man who was suffered for years with his mental health, and the fact that he had enough strength in him to return is nothing short of remarkable. Because I know quite a lot about him, and I also knew that deep down inside, he doesn't want to let people down. He's very, very devoted to his task, and when he can't fulfill it, it piles on. He is a man who I would describe as extremely overwhelmed, and not without good reason. Because actually, being a priest it's a lot harder than it first looks. I mean, to start off with, you are deemed responsible for spreading the word of God. But what happens to the sort of man who is not responsible, or rather, he spreads it in the worst way you could imagine? And what I say about spreading the word of God in the worst way possible, he says it without any enthusiasm. He says it without any sort of joy. He says it without any sort of love. He doesn't even say it with conviction or with any sense of dread in his voice. He says it as though he says it, he or she could say it about as plainly as reading the teleprompts on the news. They say it without any enthusiasm. They just say it because it's what they do. It's all they know how to do, and it's something they will continue to do until either retirement or they are about to take the seats in God's house in the sky. So you would be very, very surprised to learn, especially for people. Well, if you're like me and you've were brought up in such a way that you would understand about how the church works, and also about not only the services that the church provide, but also what they could do to outreach to people who have questions for their parish priest, because people have questions, and people also want answers, and people also want to know why certain things happen to them, and they also want to know about ways that that the pain can be eased, or they can learn to live with the weight of sin literally shackling them on the shoulders. But then, who does a priest turn to when he is having troubles with his conscience? Where is he meant to go? Does he speak to another priest? Does he speak to a member of the lay community? Does he speak to his bishop? Where does a priest go when even he is struggling with his vocation? Many, many questions. So it's not particularly surprising to learn that one of the shiny examples I think I could possibly give, insofar as my interpretation of how normal people people like you and me, for example, may interpret the Bible, is that God did not create us to be miserable, or rather, God did not want us to be miserable. He did not want to see his creation in his image or in his light to lead such dark, emptying lives. It's funny, really, because if you are to take a look at the Bible from a purely philosophical standpoint, there's actually a very strong appeal to it. I also like to imagine if you were to interpret the Torah from a completely philosophical standpoint, or if you were to even take a look at Islam from a purely philosophical standpoint, there's actually probably a strong appeal to that as well. Insofar as I can work out with Islam, for example, it means giving back to everything that the world has given you. And I know it's been it's been like nearly 15 years since I last studied Islam. However, I understand about the 5 pillars of Islam. I understand about their approach when it comes to charitable deeds. I understand about taking a pilgrimage to Mecca, and it's because it's not always the easiest thing in the world. I'm sure there's just as many Muslims in the world who are struggling with their conscience and struggling to find what exactly the purpose of life really is, when sometimes the only answers people give to each other is, you continue on exactly as normal, and you don't showcase any sort of feeling except love to God, to Allah, to Abraham, to Buddha, etc., to Vishnu, to Ganesh. You know what I'm trying to say? But at the same time, it's not really that sort of world anymore. Or rather, it's not that sort of world, certainly where I live. That's the other thing we need to come to terms with, is that I don't think, I know so, because I don't think there are many places in the world that are nearly as liberal as right here in the United Kingdom. But that's not the fault of the people. That's just I think some of us were just fortunate enough to be born in this particular century, which I think is also a great shame, because, well, we can't forget, and I refuse to forget, that as we speak right now, just in the last minute, 13 people have been killed as a result of the Sudanian civil war. I can't also forget about the famines and the pillaging, the suffering, the devastation going on between the Ukraine and Russia, between Palestine and Israel, or even conflicts arising between Cambodia and Thailand. At least I think it's Thailand. I'm pretty sure it shares a border with Cambodia. And it's not exactly as if these sorts of things are just going to stop just because we decide to ignore them. There's too much, in my opinion, of a out of sight, out of mind attitude to things. We pretend that because we don't hear about it, or because we don't talk about it, therefore it's not going on. Which is, unfortunately, a very, very silly thing to do. You know why it's an incredibly silly thing to do? Because if it was us suffering, we wouldn't want to have been forgotten either. they might even look towards the rest of the world, or probably look towards God, because I just so happen to know that Sudan has a very divided populace when it comes to people who worship Islam and people who worship Catholicism. But there must be plenty of people right now who Catholic or Muslim or whatever it may be, who were probably thinking that not the rest of the world, but their very God has forsaken them merely for the crime of trying to exist in a world that doesn't really seem real. It doesn't really, because who would want to live in a world where you genuinely believe it would be easier to be dead than to be alive? That's not the sort of world anybody should come to expect, nor is it the sort of world that really you could turn a blind eye from, because guess what? If it was us in that scenario, I'm pretty sure we'd be feeling exactly the same. It would be easier to be dead than to be alive. That's the sort of thing that when it stands out to stuff like that, it starts to weigh on a man's conscience, because, well, what on earth can we do about it? What is there anything we can do about it? I know a lot of people, even in this day and age, are very, very hesitant when it comes to the idea of charity, which is an idea that it disgusts me just as much, because I don't give to charity because I want to be seen by the rest of the world to give charity. I do it because more than anything in the world, it is, in my opinion, the right thing to do. And you should be doing the right thing to do for the right reasons. I think there was a great thing that my dad did when he was teaching, is that when he talked about charity, the idea is that you've got to give to charity, but nobody is allowed to see you do it, because it should be purely from something from in here. It should be something that you should take it upon yourself, morally or whatever else, to do. And there's a great point to stuff like that. I really, really do. And I honestly think it's the sort of thing we should encourage, because just as much as I go with, there are hundreds of thousands of people in this world right now who are going without. No wonder they want to flee from Sudan or Syria or wherever it may be, because why be a part of a world where you will just be another casualty? You don't want to live your life as a casualty, is what I'm saying. You want to live your life because living is the whole point of life, isn't it? So with that being said, we shouldn't forget about the people who are suffering, not only hundreds of thousands of miles away, but also those very, very close to us, probably even in the same room, maybe in the same house, maybe in here. But with that being said, that's certainly what I get out of it. And I'm glad. I'm glad how I feel proud of myself that I can interpret things like this, because they purely come from, honestly, what I've seen and what I've thought about for many, many years. And I don't think for one instance there's any vindication or any sort of malice towards this sort of level of thinking, because, well, as they always say, freedom of speech and whatnot, and guess what? It's never stopped me before, and I don't think it's going to stop me anytime soon. Thank you.